So coding convention, so we'll talk about what are and why coding conventions, and we'll mostly spend our time looking into coding conventions. And so let's move on. So what are coding conventions? So basically they are a set of guidelines that recommend programming style, practices, and methods for your project for the purpose of enhancing readability and of course software maintainability. So these coding conventions apply file organizations, indentations, comments, declarations, statement, white spaces, and naming conventions. And kind of obvious. So why coding conventions? Because 80% of lifetime of the software goes to maintenance. So instead of actually writing brand new code, you're going to spend in fact 80% of your time reading code written by someone else, or probably highly likely by someone else, and or the code that you have written a long time ago. And so coding conventions improve readability of the software, and so it allows readers to understand new code or old code more quickly and thoroughly. So coding convention examples. So file organizations. Files should be no longer than 2,000 lines. If it is too big, then it is considered too big. So order of parts that make up class and interface declaration. Usually you want to have a class and interface documentation, meaning comments, and then you have class and interface statements, and then you want to have static variables, and then instance variables, and then constructors and methods. So these are pretty much the order most of the code follow. Wrapping arithmetic expressions. Again, this is kind of obvious. So this is actually good practice, and this is a bad practice. Okay, so basically, this is supposed to be in a single line rather than, in this case, two different lines. Oops. Line wrapping. Sometimes you want to actually see clearly where the line wrapping happens. So the full space convention might be just too small. So 8 space convention is actually recommended. So this guy is using, these two examples are using 8 space rules, while this one is using 4 space rules. Class and interface declaration. So no space between a name and parenthesis. So in this case, here and parenthesis here, there is no space. And open brace appears at the end of the same line as the declaration statement, like here. Well, some people actually like it in a separate line, and closing brace should be in a separate line. Oops. Yeah, return statement. Return statement with the value should not have a parenthesis unless they make the return value more obvious in examples. So these two examples, you don't have to have parentheses, but in this case you have parentheses to make the value to be more readable. Naming conventions. So naming conventions make programs more understandable by making them easier to read. So they can give information about the function of the identifier. For example, whether that's a constant, whether that's a package, whether that's a class. Again, that will help you to understand the code better. So let's see some of the conventions. So packages should be all lowercase, like this. And classes should be nouns, and it should be mixed camel. So what that means is that the first character should be capital, and then small letters, and then the camel case. Interface should follow the same naming convention as classes, so camel case. And method should be verb, like a run, run fast, get back, run, and it should start with a lower character, and then you could have capital to provide separate word. Variables should be lowercase and should be short and meaningful. So something, and also actually, so something like this, float my width. And you could use one character variable like I or C when they are used as a temporary throwaway variable. So if you're using, for loop, I or C could be actually used in that case. Constant should be capital characters, and they should have underscore between the words. Programming practices. So access to instance and class variables. So you don't want to actually have your variables to be public. I mean, that is actually kind of obvious thing. I'm sure everybody follows. And instead, you should have a getter and setter method, and that should give you encapsulation. However, if you're actually creating a class that is actually used just a structure, meaning one example of appropriate public instance variable is the case where class is essentially data structure with no behavior, meaning it doesn't have any methods. It just have a structure, and those fields, in that case, could be exposed as public method, public modifier. Okay, so this is the when you have a class, invocation of class method or class, the static method or class method. This is the syntax, right? Class and dot name of the class method. However, you can actually use an object and actually call the class method, but syntactically that's allowed. But obviously, you do not want to use it that way because that could be confusing. Okay, so avoid assigning several variables to the same value in a single statement. So this is kind of hard to read. Okay, and don't use embedded assignments in an attempt to improve runtime performance. Again, this is hard to read. So instead of this, you want to actually use this way, these 2 lines of code. Okay. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. So today is a little bit kind of easy, the presentation, and we don't have a lab. Okay, so any questions? So if you have, so question from Ramik. Can you please explain technical debt again? So technical debt is just like a personal debt. This is something that you should, but you just don't do it. For example, there are some code that is not clean. It needs to be refactored, and you just let it go because it still works. Okay, but eventually it's gonna bite you. Things like that. So some of the things that you should do, but you don't do it. Okay, or cleaning up, for example, a directory structure, so things like that. Those are technical debts. So later on, in fact, when you actually cover Sonar, Sonar is going to use static analysis tools underneath. So it's using, in fact, PMD and Findbox. And Sonar will actually give you a technical debt. It will actually give you the percentage of the code that is considered as actually technical debt. And it will actually give an even the man-months figure in terms of fixing it, and even actually give you a money figure. So you can this is in fact the very nice feature of Sonar, because management really like to know if you want to actually make all your technical debt to go away, meaning you want to actually fix all those the tasks, you want to perform those tasks that needs to be done but not being done at the moment in terms of money figures. For example, it will cost $8,000 or something like that. So that is actually a pretty interesting feature from Sonar. So we'll actually cover technical debt in a bit more detail when you cover Sonar. Let's see. Let me see. There seems like a few more questions. Question from Yavor. Are you going to cover TDD, test-driven development, within this course? We are going to cover actually test-driven development a little bit when we cover actually Mockito. I'm actually debating what I should actually include TDD as part of the this course. Actually, I'm quite inclined to include TDD. So let me give some thought. Let's see. Will there be real-time coding in this course. Yes, you are going to do some real-time coding, for example, like a Mockito and fitness and Equilian. So yeah, there are some coding involved. Next question: how to make sure that we have 100% code coverage? You're going to actually use a tool. So we're going to use a tool. The tools that we're going to use is, for example, Code Pro and Sonar. Actually, Sonar is using the code coverage tools like a Jacoco and Covatra, and so the reason I don't actually have a code coverage tools as one of the topic is because it's actually being covered inside Sonar. Okay. Yeah, so basically the answer is, you're going to use a tool to find out the percentage of code coverage. Any other questions? So a better question from Vinit. A better practice question: is it better to initialize parameters in constructor or init method? Yeah, it really depends on your taste. Okay, so either one is fine. Any other questions? Okay, thanks very much, and I will see you next week.